everybody, and welcome to this edition of Chrysalis on the Couch. My name is Jude Mason and I'm a tutor with Chrysalis working in Nottingham, and I also have my own private practice in Nottingham too. So today we're going to be talking about boundaries, so therapeutic boundaries, personal boundaries, all that kind of interesting stuff that I'm sure lots of you have got your own kind of feelings about as well. Joining me today is Sue Watson and Kirsty Knight, both also Chrysalis tutors, and I'm going to let Sue and Kirsty introduce themselves now. So we'll start with you, Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue Watson. I teach hypnotherapy, so year 1 with Chrysalis in Nottingham. I've been doing that for about 6 years now. So I'm a hypnotherapist, a counsellor and a supervisor.
Fantastic.
And I'm Kirsty Knight. I teach year 2 and year 3, both in Nottingham and Sheffield. I run my own private therapy practice where I also do hypnotherapy within that. It's kind of gone towards a balance more of psychotherapy counselling at the minute, but there's more hypnotherapy coming in the new year. I also help run a training collaboration for mental health support and courses and awareness and everything. So quite interesting and busy times.
So we've got a lot in common then, haven't we, us three? So we all work in Nottingham. I think we're all hypnotherapists, we're all psychotherapists, we're all supervisors. So
I forgot about that bit as well.
So we've got quite a lot in common with the kind of Nottingham crew today. And the topic is boundaries, and boundaries are so important in every aspect of life. So we're not just going to we're going to extend this to our personal life as well, because I don't know about you guys, but boundaries is a topic I've been talking about a lot recently with clients as well, because I think people do struggle to put those boundaries in place, don't they?
Yeah, most definitely. And I think it's something that's good to acknowledge and start to think about whilst you're learning or whilst you're coming to the start of your career of what your acceptable boundaries are. But also to not forget to put yourself in your boundaries as well. So you have to be comfortable about what you're happy working within, what boundaries. I mean, organisational boundaries are slightly different, but I think if you're in private practice, you've got more flexibility, but they do absolutely still have to be there. So I think this is quite a good time whilst you're learning, but also coming to the start of going out and practicing and being the counselling psychotherapist that you've trained to be. I think it's a good start to to really start to think, what are my boundaries? Where do they come from? How am I going to implement them?
Totally. I think it's a really useful, essential actually thing to do before you start, because I think the problem is when you're training to be a therapist. I know certainly when I was training to be a therapist, I was thinking about the therapy all the time. I wasn't really thinking about running my own business. I wasn't really thinking about setting my own boundaries, I suppose. I was just thinking about the therapy. And it's so important, isn't it? Even to the extent of, especially maybe to the extent of what your boundaries are in terms of your session times. A lot of therapists have a 50-minute session. Some therapists have a 60-minute session. How are you going to be able to bring that session to a close? And I think when you start, because you might just have 1 or 2 clients in your private practice, for example, it's really easy, isn't it, to think, oh well, that the client's still talking. We'll go over the hour. It's okay because I'm not going to see anybody else for a while. And the problem is with that, what happens then when those clients are used to you always going over a little bit? Mm-hmm. They're used to being able to push it. They know that if they don't turn up right on time, it doesn't really matter because your boundaries are a little bit porous around that. And suddenly you find yourself with a full practice. And then it looks then kind of I think it's difficult for you as a therapist to then be really sort of strict. And it feels a bit strange for the clients as well, if they're used to having kind of, I don't know, an hour and 10 minutes of your time, and suddenly it feels like you're being very kind of strict with them. It can feel quite personal, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, it's something to get your head around when you're newly qualified. You're so absorbed by getting clients, and you have one or two or maybe even three, and it's so exciting, and you're so focused on meeting that client and investing, like you say, in the therapy, that you don't always stop and look ahead and think, what is this going to look like in 6 months or a year time or 6 years time? And the habits that you lay out on day one, it's very difficult to change with those clients down the line. So just because it doesn't matter now doesn't mean it's never going to matter.
And I think it matters for you as well, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because let's face it, if you're in private practice, you're charging by the hour.
Yeah.
You're not charging by the hour and a half.
No.
You're not necessarily going to say to someone, oh, we've been 15 minutes over, so I'm going to charge you a little bit more. That would be awkward. It would be inappropriate anyway, wouldn't it? And it would be unprofessional. But I think we have to that is about valuing yourself as well and valuing your own time.
It is. And I do know someone, she's a hypnotherapist. We used to work from the same venue, and she actually changed from an hour's appointment time to an hour and a half, and that became her standard session length, because she said she just couldn't keep to an hour. So she owned it, and she adjusted her prices and her time slots. And she said, I want to give my hypnotherapy clients time to talk to me and do the hypnotherapy. And she said, I can't do that in an hour, it's rushed, so I'm going to make it an hour and a half.
I feel that about 50 minutes, and I know lots of therapists do a 50-minute hour, and that, no judgment there, absolutely, because you have to do what you think is right. But for me, I prefer an hour. But I'm strict about the hour. But for me, 50 minutes is quite tricky to get everything in. I don't know about what you guys do with regard to that.
I mean, I tend to let the session flow, but also I think, just going back to something that Sue was saying, I think in custom and practice, isn't it? And I think the same is, when you set out and you start to work with a new client, as you say, if they get used to having like an hour and 10, hour and quarter, if you're then saying within 55 minutes, right, I'm just conscious of time, we need to, and they're going to be like, oh. But I think one of the biggest ones as well to acknowledge are the door handlers, the ones who stand at the door with the hand on the handle going, oh, just one more thing, I forgot to say this. And you have to be so aware of that, because you could be there for another 20 minutes. And as you were saying, Jude, when you're back to back, when I'm back to back, I certainly book 50 between. I think that gives me enough downtime just to process, then to get ready for the next person. If you're then an hour and 10 minutes, then you're shuttling one person out the door with 5 minutes to spare. That's not good for your practice either, because you need the break in between seeing the person to reset and ready for the next one.
It's not good for confidentiality either, is it? When they kind of almost like one client bumps into the next.
If you've only got parking on a road or something, and you see one person coming out and one person coming in. So I think sometimes with boundaries, that's the sort of thing that gets forgotten. That, you may have a crossover of people. You may have a situation where if you're having a really heavy session with somebody and you don't feel you can say, look, we're on the, so do you maybe need to book more time in between? But this is the sort of custom and practice that you have to bring in with your own boundaries, isn't it? And your own practice, knowing how you work. I mean, sometimes if somebody's in full flow, I must admit, I will let it go past the hour, but not much. And I will turn around and say to them, look, I don't want to interrupt, but just to let you know, that's the hour, you know. And then they'll, 9 times out of 10, they'll be, oh, right, okay, yeah, I need to finish up, don't I, or something like that. But I think it's the hidden ones that, as I say, the door handlers. I had one client that was terrible with that. So I knew not to book somebody else in for a full hour until after appointment. And I did mention it to her frequently. She went, I know. She said, but I just keep forgetting things. And then if I say them to you, I know you'll remember and will remember. Well, that's all very well. And then you've got to start, because that's another thing as well with the boundary. You have to decide if the rate you're picking is an hourly rate or a session rate, because I know some therapists do charge per session. So therefore, kind of doesn't matter if it rolls on. But it's what your boundaries are with regards to charging. Is it an hourly rate? Is it a session rate? But you have to be very, very clear on that with clients, I think.
And that's what I meant about your private practice. You run your private practice where you want to, don't you? And that's to me, I was really, really ready to be my own boss. I love being my own boss. I have a very good boss, mostly, although she works me too hard. But you know, but I was really ready to be my own boss, and I was ready to make all those decisions. But I think you have to realise when you go into private practice, this is not just about the therapy. This is about you organising your structure of your work. And if you work for an organisation, somebody else does that for you. That's it, some people, doesn't it? Some people want to do that. You know, I didn't particularly. I'd had enough of that, to be honest. But yeah, but I think also, you know, we were talking about people who kind of, they go over or they start talking about something else. I guess as well, if you have somebody that you know does that, that's something that you could set as a task, isn't it? You know, it'd be really good if next week you know, before you come to the session, you have a bit of a self-reflection session yourself, a bit of time yourself to maybe think about the really important things you want to bring up, so that you don't suddenly remember the important thing you wanted to talk about at 45 minutes, you know. Because actually, if somebody suddenly says, you know, because 50 minutes is my sort of beginning to wind down at the end of the session kind of time. And if somebody brings something up at 50 minutes, sometimes I think you know, it feels appropriate to say, that is so important, but I need to give that my full attention. And I'm not going to be able to do that now because we're at 50 minutes. So let's start our session next time so we can really give that the full attention that it deserves.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think as well, it's because I believe you two both work from home. I have
a garden room. Yeah,
but I work from a centre that provides therapy spaces for therapists.
Yeah.
So I hire a room by the hour.
Wow.
So if my client goes over, I get charged for that.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like that as an incentive to make you better at your timing boundaries, because when I originally started out, I worked from a different venue, similar setup, but they weren't as busy as my current one. And if they were very accommodating, they were very good. And if someone didn't show, they didn't charge you. And that was really, really good of them. And if you went a bit over, they didn't mind, as long as there wasn't anyone booked in immediately after you. They were fairly relaxed about it. And it was wonderful to get set up in private practice and to find my feet and to really get to grips with the dynamic and setting boundaries and learn how I worked. But looking back, I frequently went over because I knew that I
maybe wasn't good for you, actually.
Wasn't good for me. And when I moved venues, it was different because they were busier and it mattered. And again, if there's no one booked in afterwards and you go a little bit over, they don't mind so much. But often there is someone booked in afterwards.
Yeah.
So it matters, and you have to get out because someone else is coming in.
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up, you know, because I used to work from a centre, And the reason I stopped working from a centre was that one of the other therapists didn't respect their boundaries. And I ended up once with a client outside the room waiting to get in, having to apologise profusely to my client, feel like it made me look really unprofessional, because the therapist that was there before me decided it was okay to go over. And it made me feel that it made me look unprofessional. I mean, my client was wonderful and she said, this is not your fault, but it really did not sit well with me. And it was a lack of respect from one therapist to another, really. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, it makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And the venue that I'm at now, I mean, I never had any problems at the previous one like that, thankfully. And that wasn't remotely why I moved, but it was just, I found one closer to home. But the one I'm at now, they're extremely good and it's really well managed. And if the person in the room before you isn't out on time, they will do everything they can to manage that dynamic so that you have a room, even if it's not always the one you booked. So I'm not aware of it ever having been a situation like the one you've described, but it's absolutely
an awkward situation. So
yeah.
Well, for somebody who at the time had only been working as a therapist for about a year, it was an awkward situation. It made me feel so uncomfortable. And I never really trusted in that process again. I would always kind of go thinking, oh, I hope this is going to be all right. And yeah, it just made me feel really uncomfortable. And that's just a matter of professional ethics to other therapists, isn't it, really?
Yeah. But I also think, there's boundaries in different ways, because obviously I've got a room in my home that's dedicated for my office and my therapy room. So you've still got different boundaries there again if you work from home, because obviously, as I think both of you know, I've got dogs. So how do I manage those? Because if you've got somebody coming into the house who doesn't like them, I mean, if I've got clients, they're shut away. Because I think that has to be an acceptable boundary for me, because I don't want to put somebody else in the position of they're quite friendly. Well, one of them is, the other one is a jelly bean once you're in the fold. But, before that, everybody's a serial killer who comes to the house. He's very good at doing his breed standards. So for my professional boundaries, I have to make sure that they're away and they're quiet. And so they're shut away. He's in his crate, in the dining room, in the kitchen rather, with the radio on, so we can't hear the voice, all that sort of stuff. So when you work from home as well, you have different boundaries. And it's like, and this may be right or wrong, but it's one of my boundaries, if I'm seeing a guy for the first time, there's someone in the house first for that first initial meeting.
That's just safety, isn't it?
It is.
Exactly. But how many
Safety
people
for you.
don't think about that?
Absolutely.
And I'm quite robust and roughy tufty, but that's not the point. The boundary is, if I'm meeting a guy client for the first couple of sessions, I'll always make sure there's someone in the house with me, not just obviously the dogs, but a person. And again, I go out to people's homes to work as well sometimes. So I have to make sure I have a robust lone working policy almost, So there's like safe words and things like that. Somebody will always know the postcode of where I'm going, not the address, but the postcode of where I'm going to be and the time to be out. And then I'll be texting my safe word to my person to say I'm okay. And it's not just a safe word, it's a non-duress one. So these are all the sort of professional boundaries and things that we need to therapists, because most of the time we do work on our own, don't we? Unless we're within an organisation, so we have to safeguard ourselves, and safeguarding comes in with boundaries and all that, because of it, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is.
And that's
I have a dog as well, and I'm sorry if he's sort of, you've seen him pop up a couple of times. But he seems to have quietened. It's just like a little bit of a ball of fluff popping up and down, but he's now quietened down again.
Blame.
No,
Oh.
I think as well that safety aspect of boundaries is so important. And that's actually one of the many reasons why I chose to not work from home. I mean, not having a suitable space is the main one. But I think I now see silver linings of not working from home. And one of them is that the clinic that I work from is manned. It has a receptionist. It's got many other practitioners around. I'm not ever on my own with a client in the building.
There's a lot to be said for that, in fairness.
There is.
But not all places are like that. And
No, they're
where I
not.
worked, I felt less safe there than I did at home.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, the absolutely ideal for me is I don't want to work in my house anymore, but I don't really want to go to another venue anymore. So my garden room feels to me right now, and things change, don't they? But it feels to me right now the absolutely ideal setup. But as I say, things can change.
Yeah.
So we've talked. Sorry, Sue, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, and flexibility is really
Yeah.
key. Something might be spot on for a length of time, and then when it stops working for you, change it.
Well, I do work in a sort of venue I work with a charity organisation, and I work in a venue for that organisation one day a week, and I quite like going there because it's just a bit different. It's a bit of variety. What I was going to say though is we've talked a lot about therapeutic boundaries, but I've had to think about personal boundaries as well a little bit more, because I've had lots of conversations about boundaries and about people pleasing, because I think a lot of boundaries are a bit porous because of people pleasing behaviour. And I've talked to a lot of clients about that recently, who've presented with people pleasing traits. Now, I think I'm a bit of a recovering people pleaser. So it's got me to think about, to sort of self-reflect on a lot of that kind of stuff as well, actually.
I'm sorry, I'm trying not to smile.
But the empowerment of saying no, which I do now.
That's why I'm laughing.
Yeah, I know, it feels so much better. And I've and this is advice I've been giving to myself, really, that when someone asks you to do something, whether it's work, family, friends, whatever, the kind of the self-advice is to say, I just need to have a little bit of think about that, I'll get back to you. And that for me is really helped me, because in the past I would just jump in with yeah, of course I'll do that, of course I'll help you with that, and then afterwards sometimes live to regret it. So I'm a lot better now at kind of putting that little, I'll have a think about it and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, and I think that's really useful, and it took quite a catastrophic breakdown for me to learn to say no. And that there was more to it than just people pleasing.
Yeah.
But that was in the mix. And when I retrained, I learned the power of saying no. And
it's wonderful, isn't it?
It's amazing. It's so liberating. And I can say yes, and I often do say yes. But I also say no, and I don't feel any guilt about saying no.
Yeah.
Purely because I don't want to. There doesn't have to be more of a reason.
It doesn't have to be a reason.
No.
Absolutely. There doesn't need to be a justification. And I mean, this idea of kind of, I'll have a think about it and get back to you. I still may decide to say yes. Like you, I still say yes a lot. I enjoy saying yes. I like helping people. But it also means that if I say yes, I'm saying yes because I want to.
Yes.
Not because I feel like, oh, maybe you won't like me if I say no, or maybe you'll I don't know, start giving that job to somebody else. And actually, most of the time I quite like doing it. Or, maybe you'll think worse of me. It's a nice way to, it's nice to be able to say yes and think, I'm saying yes because I want to, not because I feel like I've got to.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you guys, but it's often a conversation that I have in class with the students, and say that, you have to put yourself in the equation of when you're a therapist, because if you don't, you're going to burn out so quickly. And you have to make sure, and within the boundary of self-care, as well as as you say, being able to say, at this point in time, I'm afraid it's going to be a no. Because as you said, Sue, just because you make that choice now, it doesn't mean that you can't change your mind later on. It doesn't mean that there can't be, an ebb and flow, maybe a little bit later. But at that point in time, if it has to be no, then it has to be no. And that's even the same with clients. If you're at full capacity, and you've got people asking, you're not going to be good to man or beast if you don't say, at this point in time, I cannot take on any more clients, but I will be more than happy to either help you find someone else or put you on a waiting list if they really want to come and see you. But you have to put yourself in that boundary. You have to put yourself in that equation. And, as you said, Sue, when you don't, it can be catastrophic.
Yeah.
Yeah, burnout is not a nice place
No.
to be. And I think it creeps up on you, doesn't it, burnout?
Oh, it does. Oh, it does.
Yeah, it really creeps up on you, and suddenly it's there.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. I think it's a really good idea, actually, too. And we say this to students, don't we? The journals that students write, the reflection, so important, because we think burnout creeps up, but actually there are signs. There are predictors, aren't there? And I work with anxiety a lot. And one of the first things I do is, where do you feel this anxiety in your body? I know for many years, I have a lot of migraines, and, for many years, migraine for me is a sign of stress. It's a sign of tiredness. Now, as soon as I get a migraine, I think, okay, what do I need to do in my life, to minimize, to get more sleep, to minimize stress? For years, I had migraines without really realizing what that was, what the emotional context of that was about. So these little predictions, they can be physical health conditions, can't they? That people don't realize. So although I said it creeps up, I think there are signs, but it's learning to sort of identify, what is that headache, what is that stomach ache, what's
and paying attention to yourself and your self-care and valuing yourself, because ironically, this line of work in therapy is often very isolating. If you're in private practice, it's just you. And there are absolutely exceptions, but often the dynamic in an organization, if you're not in private practice, is so overwhelmed with need and understaffed or underfunded, or that actually the self-care for therapists doesn't always shine through as strongly as we'd hope it would. So it can be quite a difficult vocation to have, really. So having those boundaries of, no, I'm going to make sure I am okay, because if I'm not, how can I be there for anyone else? You cannot pour from an empty cup.
And I think what Jude was saying as well about, there are signs. For me, it's sleep. My sleep goes, some of my students have actually sort of like said, were you really marking at 3 o'clock in the morning? And I'll be like, yeah, because I was wide awake and I decided to use the time. That for me is an indicator that, hang on a minute, that's not great, Kirsty. Let's roll it back a bit. And then I find that once I stop, and as I say, stop, take a breath, step back, think about it and go, no, hang on a minute. Yeah, okay, maybe I need to clear my schedule for just a couple of days, downtime, bit of recharge, where I don't have to get up and think, right, what am I doing today? Days where I think, right, what am I going to do today? The most demanding choice is going to be, what am I going to watch on Netflix or something like that, for example. But sometimes it's just about having that 48 hours for me of complete nothingness, and then I'm back on track. But as you said, Sue, it's about recognizing, and I love that saying that you just said, you can't pour from an empty cup. I love that. I think that is so profound, because it's true. If it's empty, there's nothing to give, and you can't give something that you don't have.
No.
So part of the boundary for wanting to provide a good service to your clients, which is what we all want to do because it's why we do what we do, but we have to put ourselves in that equation as well.
We have to provide a good service for ourselves.
Yeah, it's
I
part
mean,
of
there was
isn't it?
something going around Facebook or somewhere, you know, a kind of meme, but I absolutely agreed with it. You know, we are, however much we like to think that we are essential, and I know that, you know, we are really significant to a lot of people, but we are replaceable.
Mm.
You know, if something happened to us, sorry, but it's true. if something to happen to us at work, I'm sure that our clients would really miss us, but they would replace us with another therapist.
Yeah.
You're less replaceable to your family and to your friends. You know, if you reach the stage of burnout, you're not doing any good service to your clients at all. But what about the other people in your life? You know, we are allowed to say that our work is really important, but do you know what? Our family and our friends and our life is more important. And I think I don't, you know, I think that's really hard when you first start, because you throw everything into it, but you maybe throw everything into it in a way that does not include you in the equation. And that's inappropriate, actually. It's not right for clients, it's not right for us.
And it's not until you hit that wall that you think, maybe I should have done something a bit differently. So most of us have learned what we're saying by the fact that we've been there close to the precipice or gone over the precipice. So I think, you know, we're all coming at it from an experience of, maybe we should have done that a bit better. But from all different aspects. But, you know, I think we've all had a similar experience, because especially, you know, on the self-employed scale, if you don't work, you don't earn. But the problem is when you're in this sort of role, there's so much involved in it that you have to make sure you take care of yourself as well. And that has got to be a firm boundary, I think.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. No, not by any stretch. But that's the thing. We're always continuously learning, aren't we?
Yeah.
And, you know, the ebb and flow and the way our life changes, and, you know, our family life may change, which then has a knock on to that, blah, blah, blah. So we're always adjusting the boundaries. But I think as long as we've got a firm grip on how do I work, what works for me, and how do I implement that, and then how do I look after myself to do that? Because if you don't look after yourself in order to do that, then the rest of it is a moot point, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think as well, I really like, you know, what you were touching on there with, you know, how do I work for me? And I found since I had a breakdown that my reservoir for mental energy drains really quickly. So whereas you can work full throttle and then need a couple of days off and then work full throttle again, I'm very much the opposite, and I have to take a very measured approach permanently, because otherwise I just my capacity drops and I haven't got anything. So I mean, I would say I work part-time as opposed to full-time, but I always, as a matter of course, have an hour between clients.
Right.
That's my norm, minimum, because I need it. Because it lets me finish with a client, write up my notes, clear my head, have a break, and then get my notes out on the next client and go, okay, so who is this and what did we do last time? And I reframe back into, okay, this client is the one that I'm going to be with. And that takes me an hour. So I book at least an hour between every client, which also has the knock-on effect of, if one overruns, it's not too much of a problem. But I learned that through trial and error, because I physically almost cannot have a 15-minute gap between clients. I actually can't do it. because I'm not present for the second client, because I haven't processed the first client yet.
Yeah.
So how can I be present for you?
Yeah.
A lot of people can do it, but I had to learn, for me, I'm not a lot of people, I'm me.
Yeah.
So
I like
do it.
half an hour. It just recently it's been 15 minutes on a couple of days, but I prefer half an hour. I think what you said is absolutely right. It's knowing yourself first.
Yeah.
And then doing what suits you. So, you know, when students will often say, well, how do you do this, or how do you do that, or how do you do the other? Well, I do it like this. That's not the way to do it. That's my way to do it, because that suits me. Your way might be completely different. So maybe the messages from our Chrysalis on the Couch today then would be: know yourself, work out your own boundaries, and look after yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway.
I think that's a good takeaway. Shall we leave it there then, ladies, with those good thoughts?
I think so.
I think we should.
Okay, so, well, it's been great talking to you, ladies, and we hope you've enjoyed the conversation, and it's kind of brought some, you know, kind of brought some things up for you as well, and got you thinking about what your boundaries are and whether you are actually happy with them, whether maybe you need to rethink a few as well, perhaps, that would make your life a little bit easier. All right, okay, thanks very much, Sue and Kirsty, and we'll see you again soon, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.